It was really hard for me and obviously for them to watch the market change. It was when I was there, it was the Soviet circus, and it was called the Moscow circus when it was traveling a lot because I think that sounded more sexy. But when I was there in the beginning, they were all on salary. They were on government salary, and that was a big deal for them because they could practice, and that's usually what's expensive is the practice time. If you need 6 months to practice a trick, and that's what it can take to do a trick. It can do 1 year to learn, a couple of, or one even, very, very complex trick that for the Russians was, I think, a very big deal was to be the best in the world. So if they're going to do a trick, they want to do a trick that nobody else can do. And they all wanted to be in the Guinness Book of World Records, and they all know who else was in was in this book, and how many pins that juggler threw in the air, and they're going to try and throw, 16 if the world record's 15. And then suddenly their world collapsed. And when Russia became a country and the government basically went bankrupt and their whole economic system started to change, there was a couple things going on. One is that there were Western circuses that immediately, pounced on these Russians, hired them for cheap. The Russians went overseas and they made okay money compared to what they had been making. And I think there was a sense that, finally they were going to get paid what they were worth, for the quality of their tricks and everything else. But on the other hand, there was a lot of companies that exploited them, and they signed bad contracts. They didn't know what a contract was supposed to look like. They didn't get very much money. They didn't get health insurance. They didn't get all these things. And at the other hand, there was a group of people that were not getting hired, and they were not getting contracts, and they didn't know how to find agents and market themselves. And these were completely foreign ideas. And so a lot of them were without work, that was really sad. And they just almost didn't know how to cope because, their life had been, learning how to balance a pole on their nose, or bananas on their head. I mean, whatever it was, they spent their whole life perfecting this, and they had been compensated for that, and they had been given, they were on state salaries for whatever long it took them to build a new act, which could take, a long time, because again, you're working with very complex tricks, they're not just simple things. And so a lot of them really had a hard time, and some started, driving taxis. And it was a very, very sad kind of change in the circus world. And I think the Russians really didn't know the whole business side of it and how to market themselves so they could get more money, what their tricks were worth. And at the same time, the Western circuses, obviously they were just having a ball because for the first time in history since the Soviet Union, in the Soviet Union, they could not hire individual Russians. They had to basically, the government would produce a show and then tour it. And now, these Western companies, for the first time, were able to get really high-level Russian talent for a very cheap price. And so there was this kind of calamity and chaos, and it was a really sad time.